she is going to lose in the frigid underwater environment. But just because she lacks a lot of blubber doesn't mean it's not a powerful appendage. As you can see, Keela just soaked that wall there. Let's give her a round of applause. Alright, fantastic. Obviously these animals are well adapted for life in the Arctic Circle, and people have as well. 85% of the human populations in the Arctic are Inuit, and Inuit have been living there a whopping 5,000 years. 5,000 years in the coldest parts of the planet. I can't possibly imagine living there that long. And they've done it. Belugas are a fine example of that. While the essential vitamins and nutrients that you and I get from our daily fruits and vegetables are the same nutritional elements that people up north get when they consume an animal like a beluga. So if you get a chance to see one of our belugas, maybe Aurora, reaching the water surface, you can see that she has a lot of blubber and a lot of meat around that body. So you can imagine how long one beluga would sustain a community up north. That's very important to note, particularly because there are several communities up north which get a fresh shipment of dry food a whopping one time a year. One fresh shipment I go to the grocery store 3, maybe 4 times a week sometimes. I can't possibly imagine being in that particular circumstance. Now, what's absolutely remarkable about the beluga hunt is not only do they consume the meat on the body, but they use the entire body when the hunt is done. So things like the skin, for example, used to make shoelaces and lots of other household aspects of hunting belugas up north. Now, I am curious to see if anyone in my audience is actually visiting from the Arctic Circle today. Anyone? Okay, fair enough. You're not from the Arctic, don't panic. This next section, I know you're all panicking, this next section is still very relevant to you. If you don't live up north, you're still shaping that ecosystem each and every day of your life. Whenever you drive a car, you turn on a light, you charge your cell phone, you do your laundry, you're shaping that ecosystem. You're pumping carbon dioxide every time you use energy up into the atmosphere. It goes up, 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 and then eventually it gets stuck in our atmospheric layer. Now, carbon is a naturally forming gas in the atmosphere, but like any good thing, too much of it can be bad. Too much carbon actually creates what's called a carbon blanket. Basically wraps a great big blanket of gas around the planet. Now, anyone who's worn a blanket can tell you your body temperature is going to change, and the same goes with our planet. In the Arctic, it's felt as an increase in temperature, and as that temperature increases, we're seeing ice shifting and changing. It's actually melting and freezing at different times of the year. Now, a lot of people come to me and say, well, there is still ice in the Arctic, can't be all that bad. Well, just hear me out on this. That ice surface up in the Arctic is the base of the Arctic food chain. On it, plants are going to grow green sea ice algae. Now, this underwater plant life is so very important because it feeds invertebrate animals, amphipods, isopods, sea slugs, sea worms, hundreds of others. Now, these are going to feed fish populations, and those fish are going to feed whales and seals and people. So if ice continues to shift and change at the rate that it is, there will actually be a complete collapse of the Arctic food chain, and the Arctic ecosystem would forever be altered. Now, we've established that energy consumption is one of the leading causes of climate change, but it's also fair to say the northern communities that I've been talking about don't consume that much energy. It is big cities that do that. So, pop geography quiz, what are Canada's 2 largest and most populated cities? Vancouver, I think, is number 3. Toronto is 1, and Montreal is the other. Very good. Anyone visiting from Toronto or Montreal or those areas today? Over here. Anyone else? Over there, fabulous stuff. Alright, so you folks, you actually live close to about 1,000 belugas. Did you know that? Belugas live in the St. Lawrence, in that area. You don't consume belugas for sustenance, though, right? You don't eat belugas? No, not so much. Alright. But there are people in those areas that do rely on them from an economic perspective. There are several whale-watching companies which go up into the St. Lawrence to try and catch a glimpse of these great, big, white whales. Now, if they're lucky, and I do mean very, very lucky, they might get a chance to see a great demonstration of acrobatics, like you just saw from Keela right there. But that's a really rare instance, because usually what you're going to see from a beluga in the St. Lawrence is what you're seeing from Aurora up front. Look at her go! Okay, obviously not very exciting for us, but that is a huge research tool for us as a scientific community. On her back, you may have noticed, and you might see it on Keela over here as well, that she has a dorsal ridge. That's the cartilage along that side of her back. Now, being able to photograph the dorsal ridge, we can identify individual belugas. We can track populations, we can predict trends, we can paint a greater overall picture of the health of belugas out in the open field. That's a huge research tool for us. Now, we've looked at climate change as one of the huge factors that are affecting belugas in the Arctic. Can you folks think of maybe 2 human-induced challenges that these animals might be facing in the St. Lawrence? Any ideas? Boats is one. Anything else? Pollution, very good. Good for you. 2 for 2. Yes. All right, people from Ontario, Detroit area, I'm from Ontario, so I can just attest to it. The Great Lakes, clean or dirty? Dirty. Unfortunately, the Great Lake Basin is very dirty. A lot of those chemicals and toxins do come out of the Great Lakes up into the homes of these belugas in the St. Lawrence. Now, we've seen through blubber and tissue sampling that has been a steady increase in toxin levels in their bodies. And as you can see, Keela has a lot of blubber to spare around her body, so I'm sure she could spare a swerve or two. Now, in that testing, we have seen some positive trends of late. It's gotten a lot better, but there was a point where belugas were dying in that area and washing up on the shore, and we're having to dispose of them in the same way that we would dispose of industrial and toxic waste. That's how high those toxin levels were. It's pretty astounding. Now, the second thing that we mentioned is boat traffic, and it's very important to note that because it falls very closely into a research project that we've done here at the Vancouver Aquarium. Before I can do that, though, I got to give you a bit of natural history. Belugas migrate to shallow waters to give birth to their young. You might notice our belugas in the shallower parts of their habitat throughout the day, and that's very natural for them. They go to rivers and estuaries because it's a dark, murky, underwater environment. It's a great form of camouflage for their babies because their babies are actually born a dark gray, almost black coloration. Now, it's also important to note that belugas are highly social and highly vocal animals. They were once referred to as the canaries of the sea. They do make a wide variety of calls, so maybe sometime during this program today, we might get a chance to hear some of those vocalizations, if we're lucky. Now, it's very important to note that vocalization is key to the development of young belugas in those rivers and estuaries. Just like human babies, they rely on vocalizations from their parents to learn, especially when it comes to echolocation. Now, echolocation is very similar to a submarine sonar system, but making trips and clicks underwater. These animals can navigate their way in a dark, murky, underwater environment like the one that a baby would be born into. Now, we've done a lot of research into beluga vocalization, as you just saw right there. Now, being able to listen to that wide repertoire of calls inside the habitat allows us to isolate a lot of specific ones. Everything from calls, different social calls, contact calls, to echolocation clicks. We've heard lots of really cool stuff. So I do strongly advise you go down to the Arctic Gallery and check out that research panel. It's a full interactive panel where you can mix and match all of our beluga sounds and see what we've discovered. Now, the kind of research project that we're a part of and hoping to conserve these animals in the St. Lawrence is only possible thanks to the amazing trainers that work with these animals. They're here 365 days a year, including Christmas Day, often at the expense of their family lives to work with these animals. So they've created an incredibly strong bond of trust with them, and it's only through that relationship that we're able to learn what we have about these animals in order to better protect them. Now, we do see lots of different types of behaviors inside our habitat, none more important than what you're seeing right here with Keela and Christmas. This is a ventral present. This is the basic form of husbandry. If we're not taking care of the animals, folks, we can't get into that research and that conservation. And this ventral is a huge thing to talk about because it's actually a great demonstration of trust. Because Keela's actually having to hold her breath while Kristen is checking the underside of her body. Now, I don't know about you, but if someone said, can you hold your breath underwater for a few minutes while I check things out? It might be a bit hard for you. So that's a huge relationship thing that it's really important to point out. Now, folks, I feel lucky each and every day to come in and see these animals, see these trainers working tirelessly with them. I'm around the first time I saw belugas. Like I said, I'm from Ontario, so I went to Marineland. I was about 3 or 4 years old, and I remember turning to my mom very distinctly and saying, "Mom, she's smiling at me," talking about the beluga. And my mom patted me on the head and thought, "Oh, what are you doing?" No, it's just the structure of her face, sweetie. It's not smiling at you, but even to this day, it does look as though these animals smile at me. It may not be true, but they does look like it, and it brings a smile to my face, really. But most importantly, folks, I reminded each and every day these animals have an incredible ability to adapt to an ever-changing environment. Unfortunately, they may not be able to adapt fast enough as global climate change is having a drastic impact on the whole ecosystem. Now, I know it's common practice to implement small changes in your life to help these animals. Things like unplugging cell phone chargers when you're not using them, washing your clothes in cold water, maybe riding your bike 1 day a week to work. But I don't want you to think big, I want you to think grandiose. I want you to think of some beluga-sized changes that you can implement to help these animals. Things like carpooling programs, composting programs, reducing, reusing before recycling, which would make Keela jump for joy if you did. But most importantly, folks, I want you to remember your life is intimately connected with these animals. By the way, people in the center, you might want to watch out because there's water coming towards you.
Vancouver.